Hey, welcome back, everybody, for Week 7 of the fantasy football season, as well as welcome back to the 4-Ed pregame show here at Fantasy and Frames. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards, and with me, got the regular Frames crew. We got Nate Markham, got Jonathan Klanowski, and got Brian Ford. Start with you, Jonathan. How are things across the pond? How was the London game for you last week?
Yeah, it was good. It was a really enjoyable game, actually. We were just chatting earlier about how the games aren't necessarily the best, not necessarily the best teams that are brought over here, but we always seem to fill out the stadium no matter what. But they were. I mean, they were still a lot of fun. Seeing some sort of kind of Kyle Pitts breakout game. I mean, it was a really enjoyable game last week. So yeah, it was good fun.
Very nice. Nate Markham, how you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Good to see you back, Jonathan.
Nice to be back.
Brian, what's going on with you, man?
Well, week 7 is a little rough, but otherwise, I'm doing really well. Feeling good today. Looking forward to talking with everybody about some fantasy.
Nice. Yeah, some of these start-sit questions today are going to be a bit rough.
Yeah. So I'll start with one right off the bat. We got one league where the person has Chuba Hubbard. This is half PPR, and Elijah Mitchell. So we Brian, you put out a tweet earlier that the weather is going to be a little bit rougher in California for this game, which could hamper their passing game for the 49ers and the Colts respectively. That being the case, San Francisco is pretty good against the run. If you had to start one, who would you start? Chuba, or Elijah?
I think I would go with Chuba. Matt Rule talked about wanting to get back to the running game. And even if it's going to be short targets that we might think Elijah Mitchell gets, which are easier to handle in this kind of weather, don't forget Jermichael Hasty's off IR, and he's a pretty good receiving back from what I remember. So I'd probably go with the floor with Chuba.
So Nate, for IDP, hearing this weather information, this elevates for you all these guys, or a lot of these guys, for the Colts. I guess you would talk about Kari Willis or Darius Leonard or Bobby Okereke or Buckner. I mean, take your pick, right?
Yeah, and on the other side, Fred Warner's an upgrade. Again, hard to upgrade them much more than where they're already at, considering I already have Darius Leonard as the linebacker 1. But I think it supplants that floor a little bit more. And like you said, I think Bobby Okereke takes a little step up. Kari Willis is probably the biggest beneficiary, if you ask me, because I can't see a situation that they try to air it out too deep, something over the middle, sloppy, gross. Should be actually a really fun game to watch.
We got David from Connect Go joining us. What's up, David? Can you hear us? Nope, still not. Technical difficulties.
What's going on, fellas?
There we go.
The answer is yes.
How are we doing?
What's going on, David? How are you, man? We got a question from
There
Malcolm.
we go. What's happening, guys? Yes, so fire up Rob Gronkowski and Todd Gurley with confidence.
If Todd Gurley played for the Ravens, I wouldn't be completely anti that, considering who they're running out there nowadays. Malcolm Merriweather asking on Facebook, who to drop? Marlon Mack, Jermichael Hasty, Jerick McKinnon. Needed to drop 2. Probably the last 2. The only one of those I see, rumors going around that they may be traded to a team that may actually need to use them. Nate, what are your thoughts here? Hasty, McKinnon, Mack?
I mean, I agree with you there. Hasty's in a situation you have to, like Brian said, he's back, but now he's just one added couple touches to screw up that entire backfield. McKinnon, even last week, they didn't utilize him in any scenario. I don't see them being in trail, negative game script too often where he's going to be on the field more than Darrell Williams or as soon as CH comes back. So yeah, Marlon Mack being linked to some other teams, I guess, is intriguing, but we only got to wait 2 more weeks and then trade deadline. So then if he's not gone by then, you can just cut Marlon Mack.
Right. Let's get another question from Malcolm. Who to pick up? Darius Slayton, Marcos Callaway, or Jacoby Myers?
It's got to be Myers, right? I love Jacoby Myers. He's the number 1 receiver there.
He just needs to get that touchdown.
Has to at some point.
The receptions, the target's great. The end zone is another one. Yeah, I mean,
But man, all three of those situations are really intriguing this week because you have no Deontay Harris in New Orleans and no Taysom Hill at the goal line to screw up any type of potential look for Marquez Callaway in the red zone. You have no Kenny Galladay, no Sterling Shepard, so Darius Slayton's going to get the heavy workload in New York, whatever that may be. But Jacoby Myers is the one in New England. So whose passing game do you see having the most, I would say, attempts this week? New Orleans against Seattle?
If you're just looking for this week, I think Callaway is a decent ceiling play in a flex spot. If you're looking for rest of season, I think, like Dave said, Myers being the one in New England for whatever it's worth, I think is probably the better play.
So let me ask you guys a question since you mentioned Callaway real quickly. We'll get back to you, Jonathan. If you had to choose one to start for you this week, would you do Marcus Callaway versus Seattle or Amon-Ra St. Brown versus the Rams? Jonathan, let's ask you.
I quite like Callaway this week. I think for this question, I think Brian hit the nail on the head. I think if it's for this week, probably Callaway. I think he's got a higher upside, and Myers kind of for the majority for the rest of the season. I think he's due to score touchdowns. He can't keep putting up these numbers, keep getting these targets without scoring a touchdown at some point. But yeah, I think Callaway this week over Amon-Ra St. Brown. He had 8 targets last week. We saw Winston air it out a little bit more. Sorry, not last week. They were on bye week before. So yeah, I think I'd go Callaway there, especially with the other pass catching options out.
I struggle to trust any Lions in general, even DeAndre Swift, to be honest. They're so game script dependent. If they're in a close game, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Swift, they're viable. But if they're just getting crushed, which is the secret formula of success in Detroit, there's really just no one you can rely on solidly.
Yeah, it's also a much better matchup for Callaway as well. Seattle giving up the 9th most points to wide receivers, and obviously it's going to be a negative game script for the Lions, but it's not as if Amon-Ra St. Brown is kind of head and shoulders above any other pass catching option there.
Got a question here for a running back situation, half PPR. Michael Carter of the Jets going against New England, or what is he saying? He's saying what is he saying?
We can't read it.
Hubbard. Carter or Hubbard? Top Hubbard, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so,
hands down the volume there. Number one. Yeah. Okay, that's pretty easy. Anybody else got a start sit question we could talk about?
I wrote down a few. Do you want a gross one? Do you want a super flex one?
Let's start all.
Okay.
Let's do all.
All right. So these are all full PPR, but here's a really bad one. Jaylen Reagar at Las Vegas or Le'Veon Bell against Cincinnati.
Okay, so here's my concern with Jaylen Reagar this week is
that he's Jaylen Reagar.
That is number one. You compound that with the fact that Vegas and Philly both run zone defense on about 80% of the plays. Jaylen Reagar on the season has 13 targets against the zone with only 7 catches for 50 yards. Now, granted, that's turned into a touchdown, but he just can't seem to get away from that zone coverage. He's much better in man, and I think Jalen Hurts is much better in against man as well, other than Devonta Smith, who maybe I'll get to later. But that sucks that I have to say Le'Veon Bell simply because that's gross. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right.
Got another question before we get to the next question, Brian. Devonte Booker or Devonta Freeman?
Booker
for the
Freeman's
Giants.
There's too many running backs in Baltimore, including Lamar Jackson. You just never know who's going to get the touch. I mean, last week against the Chargers, I want to say Freeman, Murray, and Bell all got running touchdowns. So you just don't know who they're going to use. They're all red zone touches too.
Corey Davis or Jameson Crowder versus New England. Man, these are tough questions. Davis? I mean, are we flipping a coin at this point?
I think I'd go Davis. Pretty much he's got more upside. If it's full PPR, Crowder's a little more attractive. He might be a good safety target for a young quarterback, but I'd probably go Davis.
Yeah, and that's the dilemma. Is I can see that game getting way out of hand. And
I got a funny question for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're waiting with bated breath as he has technical difficulties.
Waiting with the idea of not playing a wide receiver, right? So here's my bench. I've got we got Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Ezekiel Elliott. Clearly, you're not dropping those guys, all right? Then I've got Odell Beckham, Alexander Mattison, and Jerry Jeudy. Okay, I don't really want to drop those guys, but I need a wide receiver this week. Would you just not play go with wide receiver down?
Do you have a top?
Do you have a kicker?
Yeah,
I do. I've got a kicker. I'm playing Younghoe Koo, but then I'm playing no kicker. So I mean, what if I pick up a wide receiver who gets one catch for 2 yards?
Yeah. What if what if kicker doesn't? What if Younghoe Koo scores 2 points because they scored 2 touchdowns? I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, if you're looking at the return, that variance, that I guess standard deviation from what your expectations are. Who's the best available receivers? Who are you talking to pick up? You probably just said that. And I wasn't listening.
No. I didn't actually. So right now, let me have a look. Oh, it's taking a minute.
It's all right. We'll assume that they're garbage.
Well, that's a question real quick. Malcolm wants to know if we can drop Myles Gaskin. We were talking about this on Wednesday.
No.
What are our thoughts here for doing that? Man. I think the consensus on Wednesday was to keep him. I think I said to drop him. But again, this is a really bad bye week. They don't call it the apocalypse for no reason. Right. You may not have a choice but to play him this week. And this week will be a very good indicator of whether they're where they're going with him going forward. I'd wait after this week, and if he puts up a dud this week, I think you could feel more confident about dropping him. Although I say that, right, but running back is at a premium. I mean, the volume is volume, opportunity is opportunity. And I guess the big question is, whenever you're considering dropping somebody, it's like, who are you going to get off the waiver wire that's better or has a better upside? Mm-hmm. And more often than not, you don't find that person. That's kind of like how if you all remember last year when, somebody said, drop Mike Williams. Mike Williams is dropped, or not Mike Evans. Mike Evans is droppable. You should drop Mike Evans because he's underperforming. And the biggest knock on that take was, who are you getting off the waiver wire that's going to be near to the level of production that he could have? And that's why ultimately, a lot of people said, no, you shouldn't drop Mike Evans. And, obviously that worked out well for Mike Evans managers. Same thing goes here for Myles Gaskins. Although the ceiling is obviously a little bit lower than a Mike Evans, for example. But if you're not getting somebody that could be potentially thrust into the starting role, keep them. But I don't know. It depends on who's on your waiver wire. If somebody's there.
Yeah, it's probably not.
Yeah,
most likely.
Speaking of which, so here's my waiver wire. I've got Henry Ruggs, Robbie Anderson, Nelson Aguilar, Rondell Moore, Devontae Parker. Would you drop Beckham for any of those guys?
I'd drop Beckham for Ruggs.
That's what I'm toying
with. I probably would too.
I would just rage drop Beckham just in general.
Mm-hmm.
I put it on Twitter earlier this week.
Oh, yeah,
is Beckham droppable? I hate to say it. I think he's kind of on the verge of being droppable, to be honest.
I think he's one fall away from being out as well. When he landed on that shoulder, when he's already suffering that AC joint separation, and you could tell that was, it re-aggravated it pretty bad. Just on I say simple fall. I mean, if I fell, I would break everything. But I'm not Odell Beckham. I have as many catches almost as Odell Beckham, but I'm not. And so I worry that he's going to re-aggravate something and be out for more. So I don't know. I would 100% rage drop him, like you said, Jorge. That just makes me feel good. And I would.
Doesn't it feel good to rage drop people though? Like, maybe not the next day after you regret it, but like the moment as you're doing it,
it's great. I know.
Oh my God.
And I like Brian. And as far as Ruggs, my concern, man, I don't know what to think with Darren Waller this week. That has me concerned.
I think I said this morning. I saw this morning that still not feeling good, and it's truly going to be a game time decision. Is that kind of
Yeah, I don't mess with game time decisions. Like if you're a game time decision, I mean, it is a 4:00 game, but like I don't mess with that. You know, I don't want to run that 0 out there.
Exactly. And the hardest thing with somebody like Waller is that you draft him with the intent to know that you don't have to pick up anybody else on your bench. And so you don't roster that second. You don't like, I usually have an interchangeable position for say like an extra receiver or running back or even a quarterback. If I have that mediocre, like if I go with elite at one of the ones positions, one of the, wide receiver or tight end or quarterback, I hate to roster a second one. And so I don't want to pick up anybody and it's all garbage right now. And so it's really it's just a dilemma because all the good, I'd say waiver wire ones, a lot of them play at noon. So you have to then make that decision early. And I can see that causing me, especially considering I have pretty heavy rostership of Waller this week or for the season.
Plus, you run the risk of them just being a decoy, even if they are out there.
Exactly. Yeah, that's another thing.
All right, I got a question for two pretty gross running back options. We mentioned him a little bit earlier. Elijah Mitchell for the 49ers or Damian Williams going against the Buccaneers in their vaunted run defense. Yeah, that's a tough one.
There's some gross options this week that I've seen just because the Bipocalypse has crushed everyone. I'm playing Trey Sermon in one league. It's gross.
Anybody pro Mitchell or pro Williams in this question?
Mitchell.
I have Mitchell ranked 12 spots ahead of him.
Yeah. And don't forget, you can head over to fantasyandframes.com, check on our weekly rankings. You'll find both Nate and mine there. Nate has been crushing it in IDP rankings for all the IDP lovers out there. I believe he was like number one again last week. I think it's like 3 or 4 times this season. He is
blind squirrel.
Look at the big brain on Nate.
He's got the IDP knowledge. He's got the offensive line knowledge, which is something that comes in super handy.
What a niche! What a niche!
Exactly. That's what we should be focusing on next season.
I cover bullpens in baseball, offensive lines, and IDP.
If only they had offensive line options in fantasy football. Can you imagine what that would be like?
It's coming.
I'm sure it is. Merriweather, Malcolm, Matt Ryan or Joe Burrow?
Joey B.
So here's why I might say Matt Ryan. Okay. I read Matt Harmon's column on Sunday night, and he noted that Burrow played 10 games last year. One of them, obviously, he left with an injury, so throw that one out. In 8 of the 9 other games, he threw 35 passes. Through 6 weeks this year, he's thrown 35 passes once. The offense has shifted a little bit. What Baltimore did to the Chargers has me a little worried about the Bengals this week. I think I might go with Matt Ryan. He's got Calvin Ridley back. You got Kyle Pitts. You got Cordell Patterson still.
That's a good point.
Thing he might have. I think I go Matt Ryan there. Yeah.
Let's see. We got Adam over on YouTube. Flex PPR pick one: Shepard, Renfro, or AJ Green.
I like Renfro in PPR. He's the underneath route guy. He's getting
Shepard's
a lot of
game time decision. Yeah. I'm out on Shepard.
AJ Green's big player or nothing. So yeah, I guess go Renfro there.
I think so. Yeah.
Let's see. We got Hollywood joining us. Hollywood, what's going on, man?
Hello.
Hollywood.
What's going on?
Just
another day in fantasy football paradise, my friend. Let's see. We got another
day to watch my Chiefs kick your Titans' ass today, too, buddy.
See,
welcome to the party.
Loser has to sing their favorite Taylor Swift song, which, according to Hollywood, each weekend is
every one of them.
Every one of them. Breck PF on YouTube. Pick 3 PPR: Woods, Moore, Ridley, Waddle.
So you're sitting one of those.
Yeah.
Sitting Waddle.
Man. It's between
And
Waddle and Woods.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I'm kind of leaning Waddle, to be honest with you. I don't know if the target volume is going to be there for Woods. Just he had that great 20 target game or whatever it was against Seattle, but I mean, he's not exactly the model of consistency when it comes to targets like Cooper is.
I'm going to go with sitting Woods here too. Yeah. I mean, think about the fact that what are they, like a 12.5 point favorite, maybe even more against. They're going to be running the ball at some point, and not really. Stafford's not going to do much. I would probably sit Woods.
Yeah, and I mean, like Waddle saw double-digit targets last week. I'm pretty sure Devonte Parker is out again, so it'll likely be him and Gesicki seeing all the targets again this week. So, yeah, it's a tough one to sit Woods, but I think it's probably the right decision.
Hey, Hollywood, let me ask you a prop question when it comes to fantasy points, more or less. And since you and Nate, your respective teams are taking on each other, let's just figure this one out here. More or less for Travis Kelce, okay? You know, he was banged up a little bit earlier last week, but he's going to be playing today. And this is in PPR. More or less than 19.5 fantasy points for Travis Kelce.
PPR?
PPR.
I'm gonna say more.
Okay. Well, then let's ask about your guy, one of your guys for Tennessee, AJ Brown. Look, I'm dealing with that too in a couple of leagues, and it's like, man, last week was the perfect example of what we were talking about earlier of like questionable, don't know, game time decision, and it's like a Monday night game, and it's like, do you risk it? Do you not? And I said, screw it, I'm risking it. And then like not literally 5 minutes later after I lock it in, and all the other games are starting, the report comes out, oh, he's questionable with an illness. I'm like, you have got to be literally shitting me. And of course, that's what he was doing himself.
Yeah.
Literally.
So anyhow, going back to AJ Brown this week against the Chiefs, more or less in PPR than 16.5.
That's tough.
Over under is 57.5 in that game.
Oh, that's a great.
Ryan Tannehill has not been the same. I know he's your boy Jorge, but
I know it's sad. It does make me sad. I know.
I think it's under.
Under. Okay. All right. We got a question from
because Henry's going to run right down freaking Kansas City's
Oh,
throat.
geez, here we go.
Hey,
Nick Bolton,
kiss his
IDP
butt
managers.
cheeks when he runs by a guy.
All right, got Jeremiah Dawson on YouTube. Elijah Mitchell or Mike Davis? Boring non-PPR league scoring.
Let's see.
I'd prefer Mitchell because Mike Davis is now the 1B in Atlanta. If we're being completely honest, Cordarrelle Patterson is the primary running back there.
Oh yeah, and I love to see that too.
The only reason I might lean Mike Davis is just simply based off of opponent, because Miami has allowed the second most touchdowns to running backs. They've given up 15 goal to goes, and that's I think third in the NFL, fourth in the NFL, and that's Mike Davis there more so than Cordell Patterson. But my gosh, I could very easily see leaning either direction, but I'm going to focus. I'm going to lean Mike Davis's direction.
Yeah, I guess the Falcons and the yeah. I think it'll
be a shockingly more
Yeah.
explosive game than I think people are giving it credit for.
Yeah, I think this is the coming out party that a lot of Falcons fans have been waiting for all season. Yeah, I'll lean Mike Davis in that one. But I can certainly see the appeal for Mitchell, especially given the fact he's a 49er running back. So the stigma that goes along with that, whether that's justified or not. So there you go, Jeremiah. Hollywood, do you have any start-sit questions maybe for your league, or a couple leagues that you have that you are currently debating? This can be on offense, this can be on defense, whatever you feel so inclined to ask. And you can take a minute to look it up, and we'll just keep going.
Okay.
Nate, let's do a little bit of IDP right now. Tay Crowder, Giants linebacker, him and Reggie Ragland had been splitting a lot of time, a little bit more so for Crowder. He's questionable. If he does not start this week for your IDP position, of course, remember everybody picked him up as soon as Blake Martinez went out for the season.
Right.
If Tate Crowder is not there, is Reggie Ragland the guy that steps up and fills that void for the Giants? And if that's the case, the 1B to the 1A of the question, is he startable in your IDP spot, or are you looking elsewhere?
Gosh, I watched him play here, and he didn't play much, and it wasn't much to watch. But it also wasn't much to watch because he didn't have to play significant snaps. And I think that this is bipocalypse for IDP as well. It's not just offense. There's a lot of really good, relevant IDP options that are all on the bench too. And when you look at any matchup, the one thing I worry about is just Carolina's not necessarily giving up a ton of points to their opposing linebackers. And so then I would need situational confidence to put Ragland. And I think I could pivot to other options. And your follow-up question would be, well, who were some of those options? And I don't have that off the top of my head. I'd have to look.
So I'll pose a hypothetical to you.
Okay.
And this can go to Hollywood as well. And you wrote about him, and I'm sure everybody's been talking about him, replacing J.R. Brown, David Long. Is he somebody that is, the past couple weeks, he's been playing very well for IDP purposes? Is he somebody that's reaching that must-start status, especially during the bye weeks, if he's available?
I think so. He is the guy in Tennessee. Brown will be gone. He can't stay healthy. Evans has been trash pretty much. He's gone. That's why they didn't pick up his contract. It's David Long. It's his show, and the last few weeks he's been on fire. So yeah, I think if you're hurting, you definitely pick him up. I've tried to pick him up in a number of leagues, and he's already been gone in a few. So if you're lucky enough, you can get him or trade for him cheap, then do it.
And here's a little trick just to make sure. If people are listening, they're going out to pick up David Long, make sure it doesn't say David Long Jr., the corner for the Rams, because he's garbage and will not help your team out.
Yes.
A lesson learned right there the hard way sometimes.
Let's stay on this linebacker scenario here. Sticking with David Long, him or Pete Werner. Both are young players who are starting to get more opportunity, and they're taking advantage of the opportunity. Tackle upside is there. If you had to start one this week, Pete Werner versus the Seahawks, which the running game is not what it was with Chris Carson there. Mm-hmm. You don't really know what to expect out of that offense, for worse, more so for the better.
Do we know if Alex Collins is in?
He's supposed to.
He is supposed to be active. I know they were supposed to activate Rashad Penny this past weekend. I don't know if they have activated him yet from IR or moved him up from IR.
Pete Carroll said Rashad Penny is going to play.
Okay.
I don't know what that means, but he's supposed to.
Versus David Long, who's going against the Chiefs, and you saw the success that Darrell Williams had against Washington last week. If you had to pick one of those guys, Long or Werner, I'll start with you, Hollywood. Who would you feel comfortable with?
I think I still go Long because he's the guy for Tennessee. I think Werner's still got, or he's got Demario Davis next to him, which is going to eat into his production a little bit. But the matchup, if you're looking at matchups, then maybe Warner's the guy, because that Seattle offense is just horrible right now without Wilson. So if you're putting me on the spot and I had to pick one, I think I would go Long here. I think he's playing a little bit better right now.
Yeah, and even if you add another little wrinkle to it, if Quan Alexander comes back this week, then depending upon what's going to happen there, then you have even more potential mouths to feed in New Orleans. But I do love Werner going forward. He's looked really, really good. Very shocking. And David Baum's look like garbage, so that's easy.
Yeah, you go to like Sleeper or ESPN and you look at their projected he's at the very top. I'm like, why is that? He's not doing anything. I don't know what that's all about. Anyhow, LA Rams 23 on YouTube and PPR. Who are you playing? Alex Collins, we just mentioned him with a limited role, likely. Kenneth Gainwell for the Eagles versus the Raiders, or Ramondre Stevenson of the Patriots going against the New York Football Jets. No, that doesn't sound the same as the New York Football Giants. I tried. Sorry, Jets fans. Well, since we're talking to a Jets fan, one of the Jets fans is on the one of the Jets fans. The few and far between. Brian Ford, who are you starting this week in PPR?
So this is actually a pretty interesting, somewhat gross scenario. I think Collins is going to be one of 3 guys getting some run for Seattle on Monday night. I look at probably not him. I look at Gainwell, and for a couple weeks there, it looked like he was going to have a role, and then he's kind of been the odd man out. We don't really see much of him. I think by default, I go with my guy Ramondre in a game where they're going to get. I think they're going to get up big on the Jets, and they can probably rest Damian Harris a little bit. So I think there'll be some volume there for Stevenson, even though it's full PPR, and you would think like a pass catching guy like Gainwell would be the better pick. I'm going to lean Stevenson.
I got another question from Adam on YouTube. Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers? Brady against the Bears. Rodgers against the good old Washington football team. It pains me to say this, but I'm going to go Aaron in this case. Washington is. It's just
They're going to get
bad.
ripped
They're
apart.
gonna, Hopefully Devonte Adams gets more than
very high on
this week.
I was very high on Washington defense this year. I picked them up in as many leagues as I could, and they have disappointed, to be honest.
You are not.
Me
the
too,
only
man.
one.
Bigger things.
You're
In
not
our
the-
draft night out at the Football Expo, Dave and
Yeah.
I were in the same league. We still are. And it was whatever round it was, 13 or so. And I took Washington as they were like the 6th or 7th defense. And I think people just forgot. I got more great pick for the stupid football team than I did any other pick. And maybe that's why I'm 3-3 too. Is when my best pick is your defense. Not exactly glowing remarks.
It's funny. All the local. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I find it just completely hilarious and stupid. So all the local reporters and all the local newscasts, sportscasts for Washington this week, their breaking news when it's talking about the football team is, Ron Rivera said that Landon Collins is going to be shifted more to playing linebacker, playing closer to the line of scrimmage. That's what he's going to do more of. I'm like, that's what he's been doing his entire career. I don't understand why this is news all of a sudden. He's a strong safety. He plays close to line. I don't know. It's kind of interesting for IDP purposes. But anywho, notwithstanding. Brian, do you have a super flex question for us you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so I think with Carolina leaning on the run a little more, I think I know where I'm going to go with this one. But I have Hurts at Las Vegas or Darnold at the Giants. I think there's more
Hurts.
upside with Hurts. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Although it's interesting. Go ahead.
And there's another one, and I might talk about one of these guys a little later. I already kind of downplayed Burrow. So Burrow or Tua at Superflex?
Burrow.
I have them
I'll get
9
Burrow.
and 10, actually. I have Burrow at 9, and I have Tua at 10. I like Tua a lot, and maybe I'll talk about him as well later. A lot of foreshadowing going on in this episode. But I typically, if I had to choose between Burrow and Tua, I probably would still start Burrow. I just think that the one area that he had the biggest concern going into this season, especially in the matchup against Baltimore, is how he would respond to a heavy blitz. And Baltimore's not blitzing nearly as much, about 20%, 30% less than what they did last year. And Burrow is up to nearly 75% completion percentage against the blitz. So his weakness is now one of his strengths, and Baltimore's strengths is now one of their weaknesses. So maybe that lends some credence to that.
Okay.
Let's go to that Eagles and Raiders game. Let's talk about Max Crosby, the defensive lineman / edge rusher there. Week 1, he owned Lamar Jackson and this offensive line for the Baltimore Ravens. Everyone was like, Max Crosby, such a disappointing year last year. What's he going to do this year? And against one of the fastest, most mobile, athletic quarterbacks in all of the NFL, he was all over him all game long. Went nuts for fantasy. He's going to have that same kind of matchup with Jalen Hurts this week. And seeing as how Hurts is only throwing for 180 yards a game and is running for the rest of it, I mean, there's going to be some opportunity for Crosby to get after him. Do you think that you're going to see a repeat of Week 1 Hollywood with him in terms of fantasy production, or do you think it's tempering a little bit of expectations here?
I would kind of temper. I would be more inclined to say he would follow the Week 1 output or the last week's output if he'd been more consistent. but he's kind of been hit or miss this season. It's big swings too. It's not just
Right.
small things. It's either he's off the charts or he's nowhere to be found. So I think if you expect somewhere in the middle of that, then you're okay. If you're chasing the big points, you may be setting yourself up for a failure there or disappointment. But I mean, you got to start him this week. Just because of that big potential. I would start him and say, okay, give me the average, and if you can give me the big game, then you're setting good.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Which coincidentally, I traded him last week, right after his big game. And it's a defensive only league, but I got a first and a fourth for him.
Wow. You really milked that production last week. That's good. Let's do another fantasy more or less question. David, let's go with you. Again, this is in full PPR, but this is going to be a quarterback question, so this doesn't really apply to that. Again, Indy at San Francisco. The weather is supposed to be windy. It's not supposed to be really good. Take that into consideration when answering these questions. More or less than 17.5 points for Carson Wentz tonight.
I think they're going to lean to the run game. I don't think Carson Wentz is going to deliver. They're really just relying on Hines, on Taylor. Carson Wentz is not the same Carson Wentz from a few years back, the big gunslinger. I know he hit T.Y. Hilton for over 100 yards last week, but I'm not expecting that same production. And you raise a good point about the weather. This is the stage of the year where you need to consider domes, weather, I guess just warm weather stadiums. That's why I picked Matt Ryan as one of my streamable quarterbacks this week, just because playing in Miami, it's a lot warmer.
Very good point. Conversely, Jimmy G, 16.5, more or less.
Oof, that's a good question. I struggle to trust Garoppolo just because I'm waiting for the moment that Trey Lance comes in. And it's going to be that week you start him that 3 plays in, they just decide to go with Lance. I don't know.
Well, I don't think Lance is
playing.
He's out. He's out this week at least.
Oh, he is? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Now you're up against the wall.
Yeah, that's
now.
It's probably right about there. I'm gonna go ballsy. I'll go over. I'll go over. Jimmy G is not as bad a quarterback as people make him out to be.
Right.
Nate, let's go with you with another fantasy more or less question. Michael Pittman for the Colts. We'll stick with this game. Michael Pittman with the Colts in PPR, more or less than 13.5.
So, man, with no T.Y. Hilton, no Paris Campbell, I think that he can see probably double-digit targets. So I'll take the over there.
And then Elijah.
Go ahead. No, I see.
Sorry about that. Elijah Mitchell, more or less than 11.5.
Since they don't have Lance, actually, and the goal line work doesn't have to be squandered into one of those RPOs with Lance, I'll take his chances at the over with seeing a goal line run and getting the easy 6 and then a little bit of production there.
And if you want to play more of these more or less questions, you head over to monkeyknifefight.com, use the promo code FRAMES, and get a 100% match on a deposit up to $100. Get an extra $100 for free. Who doesn't like their money? Head over there to Monkey Knife Fight today and take all their prop bets. They got prop bets for yardage, for all sorts of cool stuff. But we figure we talk about fantasy points since this is a fantasy football show, and we'll just take it from there. And if we don't have any more start-sit questions, let's go into our weekly discussion of options outside a certain range. So, for example, for quarterbacks and tight ends, we talk about outside the top 10. For running backs, wide receivers, we talk outside the top 25. And we do the same for IDP purposes. And we're going to be using ECR Fantasy Pros for half PPR scoring, as well as their IDP scoring settings. So let's start with the quarterback position. A quarterback outside the top 10. Brian, who's somebody that fantasy managers, maybe having to stream this week that you would, be confident in?
Okay. One guy we talked about already is Tua. It's an over-under 48.5. Not a good Atlanta defense. They're 28th against the quarterback, have managed 1 interception and 9 sacks all year. Here's another guy that people aren't probably thinking about this week. Justin Fields at Tampa Bay. Okay. this may be a game where between the defense getting to him and him having to scramble, getting some rushing floor, plus being able to exploit the Tampa Bay secondary playing from behind. I know Fields is disappointed. I know the play calling has been conservative. This may be a week where they have no choice but to take the handcuffs off and let him throw a little bit.
I like that. And I like Fields, so I'm hoping that comes true.
Nate, who do you got outside the top 10 in quarterbacks that people should be paying attention to?
So we did say Tua, which I think every point that Brian made is exact. I also think it could be a showcase piece. Hey, look what we have here for trades, Washington. Look how good Tua did back-to-back, potentially 300-yard games, couple touchdowns. I think this is a good week for Jameis Winston. And I know Jameis has been in one of those weird situations where overproduced and his metrics, 4 touchdowns on 15 passing attempts isn't the norm, but Seattle's not rough against the pass. The fact that there's no Taysom Hill, I think that eliminates those goofy goal line plays. You don't have to eliminate and take out the 2 areas this year that, Jameis hasn't really been able to exploit or take advantage of is no Marquez Callaway, no legit one for some of those weeks, and no goal line work because they put in Taysom. So I think this could be a pretty nice, safe 250 yards and 2-score game for Winston.
All right, Hollywood, let me ask you a question. You get to pick between these 3 quarterbacks outside the top 10. Would you start Daniel Jones versus Carolina, Taylor Heineke at Green Bay, or Mac Jones at New England or at the Jets?
Mac Jones.
Just because it's the Jets?
No. Daniel Jones has just been. He just turns it over too much. He's too inconsistent. You'll get big weeks where he hits rushing for some reason. He'll get a lot of rushing yards that kind of inflates his value, I think. And then you'll get weeks where he just seems to not like football. So, I mean, if he was consistent, I think you would have to look at him. But with all the weapons out, I think that kind of takes him out too. Who was the other one? My brain just went blank.
Taylor Heineke going against Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, Green Bay's defense is not that good overall. Getting better in some areas, but I just don't trust Heineke myself. I mean, especially after last week. I mean, I think the safer floor is Mac Jones because I don't think Belichick's going to let him get too crazy wild to where it kills him. Now, he's possibly going to make mistakes because he's a rookie. That's what they do. But if you're looking for the safe option, I'm going Mac Jones. And then, of course, they're playing the Jets. So
right.
Sorry, Brian.
I mean, you're looking back. I'm looking back on his fantasy projection. This is Mac Jones. I mean, like, he's a good 14, 15 point a week safe lock. I mean, if you need, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think
he's consistent with it, I guess is my point where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I think he's consistent and safe, and I think the Jets can, even still, I still think the Jets can force him into some turnovers, a pick or two, because he's just so young and inexperienced. So,
right. We got another question from Breck PF over on YouTube. Devonte Booker. I'm assuming you mean Miles Sanders, or are you talking about Emmanuel Sanders?
It's on a bye.
It's on a bye. So yeah, it'd be Miles Sanders. Yeah, that's all right.
Well, my brain straight went to Barry Sanders, so that tells you what I'm thinking.
Barry Sanders, it is.
You're playing Hall of Fame edition of Madden or something, right? I'd go Booker. The Philadelphia Eagles offense, or offensive coordinator or a head coach. Apparently, they forgot that they actually have Miles Sanders on their roster, and they actually have running backs, or you can actually use your running backs more than 1 time or 2 times a game to keep you in games. So I'm all out on Miles Sanders. Give me Booker.
Yeah,
David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's got to be Booker. I mean, Sanders is borderline. I wouldn't say droppable, but if you're trading him, you're probably getting like a wide receiver 3 or something.
Like in a redraft league, in
a redraft, definitely not dynasty, but right. Still, I struggle to trust him. I got him in a couple of leagues, and I'm forced to play him. I'm not happy about it, but if you have better options, especially Devonte Booker, we spoke about it last week. I mean, people forget that Devonte Booker a couple of years back with CJ Anderson. I mean, he was a full-on RB1, so he's got the upside, he's got the potential. And even with the Raiders last year, when he filled in for Josh Jacobs, he did well.
Good points. All right, let's go to running backs. Now we're talking about running backs outside the top 25 and half PPR scoring according to Fantasy Pros expert consensus ranking. Nate, let's start with you. Who do you got as far as a good running back option?
Week like this, there's a chance that maybe in certain shallow leagues he might be available. AJ Dillon over the last couple weeks has actually looked really involved. I mean, to an extent. I mean, obviously it's not to the capacity that Aaron Jones is, but matchup against Washington. Obviously, I think the positive game script should be in their favor. If you want to consider it garbage time, or you just want to consider it a little easier of times, and they can work the ball into AJ Dillon a little bit more. He doesn't need much more volume than what he's gotten. I feel like the last 3 weeks he's had, 15 carries. He translated into 81 yards. 8 carries turned into 30, but on that same game he had 4 catches for 49, which is kind of an outlier. But then last week he had 11 carries for 59 yards. So if you can get that, get that touchdown on top of the 8 to 10 carries for 40 to 65 yards, that's a solid, especially in this week. That's a very, very good score potentially for a guy that, like I said, could be on the waiver wires.
Mm-hmm. Who's the better backup running back, Alexander Madison or AJ Dillon?
Dillon.
I think so too. But what about Tony Pollard? If you throw Tony Pollard into that mix,
I mean, Tony Pollard now is more a startable option.
Right, he's he's a must flex at this point. The way
pretty much. I wouldn't even put him in that category. I mean, obviously, if Zeke is out, he's not just an RB1, probably an elite RB1.
And I don't watch Dallas as closely, but I don't want to say a lot, but I've heard that Pollard's not starting running back material, that he's just a spot starter guy that plays that RB2 role behind Elliott, can come in and change. I see him more than that. I think you put him in the right situation, he'd be a hell of a starter.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to throw out somebody that this is going to be for a DFS purpose, just because I like the narrative and I like the matchup. Granted, he's not getting a lot of work, but this could be like I said, going back to narrative, throwing David Johnson into your lineup, going against his old team, the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals are like in the top 5 in terms of worst run defense allowed. It's going to be a game where the Texans are going to have to play catch up from behind. They can only throw to Brandon Cooks only so many times. And David Johnson, when he's been trusted in the receiving game, has played very well for fantasy purposes. And like I said, the narrative's there, the matchup's there, and probably you're going to get him for pretty cheap on whatever DFS platform you have there. So gave David Johnson a try there.
Yeah. Quick question.
Go for it.
Not more or less this week, but long term. What are you doing with Ronald Jones? I mean, I feel the same way, but for some reason I can't bring myself to cut him, or you're not going to get value for him.
Right. It comes down to, I think, who are you getting that could have bigger upside that's available on your waiver wire?
Yeah. I mean, an injury to Fournette and, Jones could be somewhat relevant. Might be worth holding on to. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I got David back here. Brian, you got a running back for us outside the top 25?
Oh, we were talking in the Slack chat, and I was really surprised that with this kind of ugly week, there's a number of running backs and wide receivers that I, wouldn't mind. We already talked about my guy Ramondre, another guy who might, another backup running back who might get touches in a blowout game, Sony Michel. And probably a deeper cut for me is DJ Dallas, ranked number 48 in Fantasy Pros. Got a 16% target share last week. The only thing changing is Rashad Penny coming back. Could be a good check down for Geno against a pretty good defense. I'm rolling him out in a couple of dynasty leagues where I have to. Things could get uglier than DJ Dallas this week.
Yeah, he's been pretty much their pass catching back, and he's catching the ball right around the line of scrimmage, around 3.5 yards. So, yeah, that's definitely a good call. Let's go to the wide receiver position here. Outside the top 25, man, this is all sorts of gross. And I find it hilarious that Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney are back to back at 26 and 27. That just screams, ugh, God, I can't do it. I think I'm going to go with Callaway, to be honest with you, going against Seattle. We talked about him earlier as a potential matchup here. I think this is going to be a high passing volume game for Jameis Winston. The defense I'm not really worried about on the back end for the Seahawks. And the target volume has been there, as Brian, you had mentioned earlier, in the past couple of weeks for Callaway. So give me Callaway this week outside the top 25. He's currently the wide receiver 36 in half PPR scoring. David, you got wide
Where do
receiver
you guys? Well, yeah, a guy we mentioned before, Henry Ruggs, definitely on. I like the upside. The trouble with Henry Ruggs is he can goose egg you. That's the risk you run with him. But he's that 180 yards and 3 touchdown potential kind of guy. I mean, people forget that Gruden picked him with the first option over Jerry Jeudy in the draft. So he's a speedster. I like him. But one thing I was going to ask is Brandon Cooks. Where do you guys have him ranked this week?
He is my wide receiver 18.
18, gotcha. I mean, he might be the steal of the draft, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
He's looking like it.
I mean, he's had 5 catches in 5 of 6 games. He's the focal point of that offense. I love Jorge, your David Johnson narrative. I put the same thing down because he was vocal. He's been vocal this whole week with a lot of beat writers talking about how he's been in this kind of bubble and he can't escape. It was like a funk that he just was disappointed that he was traded and not wanted. I would tell the guy, like, hey, dude, you got traded for DeAndre Hopkins. That must, no matter how you see that narrative and how many people say it was the worst trade ever, look at your value. You're compared to DeAndre Hopkins. Hell, if someone said, here, Nate, we're trading you for Brian or Dave or Hollywood, I would take that as a compliment. I'd say, wow, I'm at their level. That's pretty good.
Wouldn't that be cool in the podcast world if we could do trades?
Exactly.
Brian, you got what? Dynasty Rewind.
Yeah. Shout out to Michael Bauer.
Wide receiver? Yeah. So we talked a little bit about Renfro. A lot of people like Bateman this week, ranked number 42, but I am going to give you my deep sleeper for the week. I want to go on record in case I'm right, and in case I'm wrong, you can roast me. Ranked wide receiver number 66 in Fantasy Pros ECR, Diami Brown. Okay. Let me just tell you why. Still no Jair Alexander. Kevin King's banged up. I think he's expected to play, but he's questionable. I mean, Nate probably knows better than I do. There's no Curtis Samuel for Washington. It's going to be the type of game script where they're going to have to play from behind against Green Bay and probably have to throw the ball further than a McKissick or Ricky Seals-Jones target sometimes. He was an electric playmaker in college. He's my deep sleeper for the week, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but Diami Brown.
I like it. Let's go tight end outside the top 10. He's right there at 11. It's kind of hard to pass up on Hunter Henry, right? In fact, he should not be on your team, on your league's waiver wire, just because of tight end being the landscape that it is. But he has been producing touchdowns. I want to say in the past 3 weeks. He's
better with tight end over Johnny Smith. I mean, I think everyone was expecting Johnny Smith to run away with that number 1 job there, but Hunter Henry is the tight end one there.
Speaking of tight ends, let's ask the question now that they're no longer on the same team. If you had to start one this week, Dallas Goedert versus the Raiders, or Zach Ertz versus the Texans. The Texans have been kind of a sieve at the tight end position. Let's go to you, Hollywood. If you had to pick one of these tight ends to start for you, Ertz or who did I just say? Goddard. Thank you. Who would you pick?
I think I have to go with Goddard. He's other than a few hiccups where he's been out or whatever, I think he's their future anyway. So I think, he's outscoring Ertz a little bit right now. So I think he has more of the long game. He can, not that Ertz can, I just think Goddard can stretch the field a little bit more. Looking at some scoring, they're pretty close. I mean, they're in this one league I'm looking at that I play in, they're exactly 16 and 17, and they're separated by 0.3 points. So, for me, I think looking at the matchup, you go Goddard because Detroit's just going to struggle. Maybe Ertz gets more targets, and then you're kind of looking at what they do with those targets. I still like Goddard. I think he's just a little bit better at this point of their careers.
Nate, are you rolling out Mo Alley Cox this week versus the 49ers?
No. I mean, again, I hate this. If I'm searching deeper for a tight end, I'm honestly probably gonna hang tight and wait and see if there is news that Darren Waller's out. Foster Moreau might be a good pivot.
Ooh, good one.
There, as far as tight end overall defense, again, it's everything is kind of touchdown dependent. I like outside the top 10 and burnt me so many times this year. I think Robert Tonyan should be in a situation. I mean, this is the ultimate, the epitome of should be, because if you look at Washington, they have allowed 51 targets to the tight end, 12 red zone targets to the tight end, and they've allowed only one touchdown on that. The law of averages will say that eventually that should change and shift. The problem is Robert Tonyan doesn't have any production in the red zone either. Aaron Rodgers isn't looking his way for some weird reason compared to last year. So, I mean, if you want to play the average game, I think this could be that Robert Tonyan game. But I'll always love Big Mac. It's an undying love. So, yes, I'll always start Wally Cox if you ask me, Jorge.
All right, let's go defense, Hollywood. Nate, let's do this. Defensive line. Who's the defensive lineman, Hollywood, that you think people should pay attention to this week?
Oh, man.
Defensive lineman, edge rusher, however you want to.
Well, I guess it kind of depends on, what you're looking for. Are you looking for an edge rusher or an interior guy? There's a lot of, if he's healthy, which was scared to death last week when he left, is Darrell Taylor for Seattle. Apparently it was just a shoulder thing, so it wasn't nothing, super serious. Apparently he was back at practice, so if he's a go, you got to get him in your lineups because he's been their best pass rusher by far. Would have been last year for him too, but he had some kind of nagging injury that kept him out. So healthy now, this is what we've seen when he played college at Tennessee. I mean, he's a pass rushing machine. So if he's playing and you can get him, I'd definitely start him. What
about you, Nate?
Nice. If Hollywood take the edge, he mentioned the interior line. If there's an interior line play, you and I both talked about him a couple times this week so far. Christian Wilkins against Atlanta. Miami's pressure up the middle against most likely Jalen Mayfield. It's embarrassing that I know his name. Jalen Mayfield is not a great player. Sorry.
He's no Alex Leatherwood.
He's actually not. Alex Leatherwood, since his move to guard, has actually been a much better offensive lineman than Jalen Mayfield. And you shouldn't know Jalen Mayfield's name as being one of maybe right now, I'd have to check again, most revolving door at guard, but that's what he is. And that gives Christian Wilkins that leg up. And I think that there's a chance for him to get some penetration, some tackles behind the line of scrimmage, as well as maybe that sack or sack and a half that he's looking for.
Let's go linebacker. We talked about David Long earlier. What are our thoughts on Kenny Young going against this Lions team that the passing game is not really there? They've been having to rely more on the running game. Do you think this is one of those weeks where Kenny Young kind of reemerges a little bit? I know he's been kind of a little bit inconsistent here or there, but especially with snap counts, I feel like he's always like rotating. I feel like the linebacking core for the Rams is always like rotating in terms of snap percentages. You think Kenny Young has a good matchup this week, Nate?
I worry about what you said. The snaps. I mean, you can go from seeing almost 100% of snaps for the first few weeks to like a little over 60% last week, and didn't do much with those snaps. And again, like you said, I think this is a game that could easily get out of hand early, and I think that Detroit's not going to necessarily keep the game in the middle of the field. They're going to want to try to spread it out wide a little bit, or DeAndre Swift out to the outside. And I don't trust Kenny Young to be able to keep up with DeAndre Swift on sweeps or outlet passes much more than any of the other options, personally.
What about Derrick Barnes? Is he somebody that on the other side of the ball for the Lions that you're pretty big on?
Me?
Yes.
I like Derrick Barnes.
Yep.
I always have. I really like to see his plays evolve in each week. He ranks consistently really high with PFF. So even on limited snaps, I think, like you said, the Rams should have a heavy dose of Darrell Henderson and Sony Michel, as Brian alluded to. And I think that the game is not going to be something that Detroit's going to be able to hold on to the ball. I think you could see 80, we might see 75 to 80 snaps out of Derrick Barnes this week.
Hollywood, who's the linebacker people should be playing this week?
I like the Derrick Barnes one, and just to kind of piggyback, if you're in a super deep league and you're hurting, go pick up his teammate Jaylen Reagar. He's had a couple good weeks. I think Barnes, getting back to Barnes for a minute, I think his value really took off the minute Collins was out.
Right.
Once that happened, that was the writing on the wall that Barnes was going to be the guy. So yeah, I really like him.
Is there a chance this week, Hollywood, that we actually see Zaven Collins get a little increase in snaps with no Chandler Jones and the same? Or are we doing the same song and dance we did last year with Isaiah Simmons? This is the situation? Oh, there's no this player. This person's out there. All the arrows point towards more snaps, but he doesn't do it.
I don't want to say that we're in the same situation, but it almost feels like it, right? I mean,
dirty. I don't like it.
Yeah, and I hate to say that because I'm super high on him. He started last week and only played 16 snaps.
Right.
Started the week before and played 34. So and that was his, as far as games go, that was his high. He played 52% 2 weeks ago against San Francisco. So he's making the starts, which tells me they see something in him that's helping him now, but he just hasn't kind of produced yet. You got Houston this week. I think until he becomes consistent and finally does what we're all hoping, if you're looking for one shot to start him, it's got to be against Houston, because I think they're going to be focused on J.J. Watt, and you're going to have Hopkins coming back, so it's like a revenge game. I think they can get overlooked with that, and maybe Collins can come in there and be that surprise. Maybe this is his breakout game right here.
All right, let's go. Last one, defensive back. Nate, who do you guys defensive back outside of the top 25?
Man, and this one was by far the most challenging, I think, especially considering, because this is where the bye weeks seem to be hit. But where he's ranked somehow, and I think it's just maybe not getting caught back up to being out for so many weeks, is Antoine Winfield Jr. against the Bears. Love Winfield. Hollywood and I have talked about him in the past. Playmaker, can come up and play the line of scrimmage. I think in game against Chicago, you're looking for Fields to make a mistake. And with their secondary being so banged up, I think they're going to ask even more out of Winfield this week, which is incredible to think of, considering how many different spots he might have to try to occupy with the list of injuries across that secondary. But he's always he's a splash play away from being a defensive back one each and every week.
I'm going to go with somebody who's coming back from injury, who honestly, I didn't think he was going to be the starter this year. I thought the rookie they drafted was going to be the starter. I'm talking about Eric Harris of the Falcons. He's playing more. You're seeing him play more closer to the line of scrimmage, and as well as playing back in coverage at strong safety. He's back to full health. His tackle volume has been pretty consistent there. Again, if you need a bye week fill in, he's been surprisingly productive. So Eric Harris is somebody to check out. Hollywood, who do you got for a defensive back? Really quickly to round us out.
I would look at Asante Samuel Jr. For Denver, playing pretty much all the snaps for him as a rookie, starting every game, and has had some, for the most part, you're looking at least 4 tackles a game easily. So, if you're needing somebody there, and he's got big playability, with the interceptions and stuff. So,
all right. Well, that's going to round out the Forehead pregame show for Week 7, folks. Good luck in your matchups this week. Of course, we have 2 hours before kickoff for East Coasters for the 1 o'clock games. You can hit us all up on Twitter. I think all of our Twitter handles are there. David is at Fantasy Go NFL on Twitter. Of course, hit up the Fantasy and Frames account. Head over to fantasyandframes.com. Read our rankings, last minute rankings that are going up very soon, as well as all of our prime matchup articles at each position, and our start and sit stuff, and just read all the stuff we did this week. Get you ready for Week 7. Good luck this week. David, thanks for joining us. Hollywood, thanks for joining us. Brian, Nate, as always, great time, great stuff, great information. I'm Jorge. We'll see you back next week for the Forward Pregame Show, as well as Fourth and Frames, both on offense and IDP on Wednesdays. Take care, folks.